Hello everybody, welcome to presentation 9. After this, we'll have one more presentation to discuss what our last topic, okay? Right, so in this presentation, we are going to discuss ethics, okay? Well, that's basically a topic that we can discuss on and on, basically, because it evolves. All right, so what do we mean by ethics? As a rule of thumb, ethics basically provides us with rule of thumbs to say something good or bad. So it is a set of principles and values, okay, that govern the actions and decisions of an individual or group, okay? And in saying that, we may also want to refer to the legislation, but laws itself are not enough because in some instances, ethics may also refer to the way we view the incidents. Okay, therefore, we also need to be we also need to consider the social taste, if you like. Okay. Okay. So let's look at what we mean by behave ethically. Okay. It is actually referring to the behavior according to a set of standards where it is actually applicable for everyone, at least for everyone in the same culture. Okay, so that's what we expect. Okay, therefore, can that change? Of course, it can change. It can evolve. And if you refer to the institutional theory, the institutions, the informal institutions that basically revolve around the formal rules and informal rules, the informal institutions may evolve slowly. Okay, so the one that can evolve, the one that can change fast, basically the formal legislations. Okay, right now, acting with integrity actually means as a manager we become a role model for the team. Right? And the question, if we discuss about the standard, the question here is, what is the standard? What do you mean by standard? Okay, and organizations actually refer to what we call as the organization's culture. Okay, and in terms of organization's culture, we actually refer to the shared values, principles, traditions, and ways of doing things that influence how organizational members act. Or in other words, in a simple term, it is actually about the way we do things here. Okay. And in terms of the way we do things here, you may look at your own organizational culture. The way you do things in your organization is different to the other people. Okay, the set of behavior that your organization adopts is different to the other organizations. Okay, for instance, some other organizations may require us to have a formal meeting presentation, for instance, whilst the other organization may be more informal, where decisions can be made based on our discussion with our manager, basically. Okay. Now, the corporate culture here is considered to be important in recent corporate scandals in Australia, such as underpaying. You can recall some cases that the media have given coverage, where some retail stores underpay the employees, and that also includes some other organizations as well. Okay, and when an organization's culture accepts shady practices, the employees see their own behavior through the organization's cultural lens, and their shady behavior looks okay, even when it is not okay. So years, you may recall that several years ago, one of the airline company um, sacked certain employees because of sharing pornographic imagery, and the employees place a confusion in there because they said, well, we are normally okay using the company's computer to share that kind of this kind of imagery. Now, why am I sacked? So that's basically going back to the organization's culture, which one that we accept, which one that we don't accept, and how we change it if we don't think that this is a positive culture. Okay? Right, again, the corporate culture or organization culture is basically the way we do things here, the way which one that we accept as our standards, which one that we don't accept, okay, when we operate as a team. Okay? Okay, so who are the stakeholders when it comes to ethics? Well, basically, it includes the community and the wider society, okay? And so your local community, the organization's local community, the wider society of the that the organizations are dealing with are basically the stakeholders, okay? And customers, clients, okay, they are our stakeholders as well. Okay? And employees, they are our internal stakeholders. Okay, if we refer to the previous topic when it comes to stakeholders, okay, the owners of the business, okay, and the supplier. So they basically are our stakeholders in the when it comes to ethics. Okay, so why do we need to consider the stakeholders when it comes to ethic discussion? Well, because we need to operate in the ethical manner when we run the organization. Okay? Everybody is actually looking at us. Okay, now the question is, why does ethics become a topic in today's business landscape? Well, the reason is because we want to ensure that whatever we can enjoy today can be passed on to the next generation, next generation, next generation. Okay, therefore we need to ensure that we operate ethically. Okay, if you look at the foundation of a business or an organization, one of the main goals of the organization is to make profits. Of course, we have the rights to be rewarded. Okay, in our system, in our capitalism system, if we step back a little bit from the economic management perspective, we understand that we will be rewarded if we can meet the customer's needs or demands. Especially if we can do that better than the competition, we have the rights to claim profits. Okay, and in doing so, we also need to ensure that we adhere to the boundaries. In this instance, the ethical standards, okay, or code of ethics when we operate, when we compete in that market. Okay, so therefore, although we have the rights to compete in our capitalism system, or in our economic system, we have the right to compete. Okay, we have the right to make profit. We have the freedom to choose. Okay, and we have the right to own property or lease property or rent property. Okay, and therefore so when we claim those rights, we also need to consider the boundaries, in this instance, the ethics. Okay, and again, as we discussed before, why ethics? Because again, we want to ensure that everything that we can enjoy today can be passed on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. Okay, so why is that? Why is that related to the sustainability of the organization, and in a broader sense, the sustainability of the entire society? Well, because if we operate ethically, we can expect that we adhere to the values that we adopt together. Okay, so you may recall that years ago there was a company named the Lehman Brothers, for instance, where they had to file bankruptcy because of failing to meet the standard in terms of the ratio between their own capital to the investments. Okay, and as a result, since their investment requires them to collect the money for longer term because it was in the property business, so they have to file bankruptcy, and that actually provoked a question for everybody whether we can trust the economic system, we can trust the capitalism system. Okay, that includes the investors. Okay, so we like it or not, most of us in Australia are investors through the superannuation system, for instance. Okay, so the collapse of the Lehman Brothers actually provoked that kind of question: can I trust my money in that system or not? Okay, so therefore we need to. That's an example. Okay, now the question about ethics and also like the risk management actually have become very critical recently because of the practices that some organizations have performed, and they basically provoke some questions why they can do that, and so on and so forth. Okay, right. So that's basically the ethics, the stakeholders of the ethical issues. And being ethical actually means, or socially responsible actually means going beyond legal and economic obligations. Okay, so we go beyond the legal and economic obligations to act in ways that are good for society. Okay, so this is actually the question where the ethical issues basically provoke us to think beyond the economic goals of the company or financial goals of the organization. We need to also show our responsibility to the society. Okay, without that, we can't sustain the business, and we can't sustain the system that we have built together as a system. Okay. All right. So, how can managers identify the ethical things to do? Okay, and that actually leads us to the perspectives, okay, the views of the ethical standards. Okay, as we just discussed before. When it comes to ethical standards, it may go beyond the legal system. Okay, therefore, we need to have some sort of standard to declare our action, to justify our action. Okay, the first perspective is what we call as the utilitarian view of ethics. Okay, where ethical behavior is solely on the basis of the outcomes or consequences. Okay, so in brief, as the goal, it's to provide the greatest good for the greatest number. Okay, so that's the utilitarian view of ethics. Okay, and the second view is actually about the right view of ethics. Okay, where the ethical behavior is viewed as the behavior that respects and protects people's individuals' liberties and privileges, including the rights to privacy, freedom of conscience, and free of speech and due process. Okay, the goal is actually to avoid or to minimize interfering with the rights of others who might be affected by the decision. Okay, well, you can also debate recent cases like Facebook, for instance, social media, where in their business model, actually, they they declare that all information, photos, and so on and so forth, when we post it on Facebook, that belongs to Facebook, and so that they have the rights to use them. Okay, and the third view is actually the justice view of ethics, where the focus is actually on choosing the actions that fulfill principles of procedural. So it's more like procedural, if you like, or procedural view of ethics, distributive and compensatory justify. Okay, so the procedural justice requires that decision processes to be consented by those affected by the decisions. So that's what we call as the justice view of ethics. Okay, so the other three perspectives that managers may adopt. Okay, in certain cases, the managers may adopt. The company may be affected in terms of what kind of perspective that they adopt. Okay, of course, when the other three major perspectives. Okay, when you consider different culture, you may also have different perspectives as well. Okay, from Asian culture perspective, for instance, some Asian groups may adopt the Confucianism values or the way they think, they view of ethics. Okay, where they normally respect the elderlies, for instance, in terms of values that influence how they practice the ethical behavior. Okay, and when they also suggest that if respect one to another, basically, so or considering the relationship between ourselves to the others as part of the central behavior in the Confucianism values. Okay. All right. Now, we have, as a manager, we have options in terms of implementing the or developing the ethical strategies. Okay. Now, these options are basically, if you recall the previous couple slides, ethics basically go beyond ethical issues. Basically, go beyond legal and economic standards. If you look at that, these options here basically show us the evolution, if you like. Okay, so the first one is actually the obstructionist strategy, where these companies basically fight social demand, and their focus is actually on the economic objective. So basically, these kind of organizations, have a strong interest in achieving their economic objectives. Therefore, the social side of it, they are lacking of the social side of running the business. Okay. The next one is basically one step higher. That's what we call as the defensive strategy, where they do minimum legally required. Okay, so they meet the economic and legal responsibilities. Okay, so they comply with the regulations. Okay, and at the same time, they also strive to meet the economic objectives. Okay? One step higher is the accommodative strategy, where they do minimum ethically required. Okay, they meet the economic, legal, and ethical responsibilities, basically. So they meet the minimum requirements of the ethical standards. So they may have developed their own code of conduct. Okay, for the organizations to adopt. Okay, and they also reinforce that. Okay, and at the highest level, they adopt the proactive strategy, where they take leaderships in the social initiative. So they influence the others in terms of setting the standards. Okay, in terms of if you look at the industry in the broader sense, they may introduce their own standard. They influence the others. Hey, look, guys, and this is not correct. We can't do business whilst we jeopardize the privacy of our customers. So we need to change that model. Therefore, this is what I propose us to do, for instance. Okay, so they meet the economic, legal, ethical, and discretionary responsibilities as well. Okay, that's at the highest level. Okay. All right. Now, you may recall that we discussed this some time ago, okay, the triple bottom line, okay? So the companies that adopt, the companies may also, from the performance perspective, the companies may also measure their performance based on these three aspects, okay, the profits, people, and planet, okay? That includes the some ethical behavior as well, okay? Okay, now, interesting to have your thoughts about social enterprise, which is basically a new type of business, new type of enterprise where they focus on solving social problems, okay, whilst working on generating economic objectives, okay. So this type of enterprise is founded based on social problems, and in solving the social problems, they do commercial activities that generate profits, and they put the profits back to solving the social problems, okay? And some people suggest that these guys are actually ethical enterprises, okay? So what's your thought? It's interesting to see your thought whether this kind of enterprise is actually the new heroes in today's economic context, okay? Economic and social context, right? So some social enterprises may focus on getting the youngsters to be active, for instance, okay, and they promote that, okay. In doing so, they do activities and they make profit to support the their clients to be active in terms of achieving the objectives, okay? Or they may do trading activities with something else to finance some projects like clean water, for instance, okay? Or to fight slavery, for instance, okay? They conduct the activities, commercial activities, whilst they also and they use the profits to finance their own social mission, okay? All right, so that's a thought, and you may also have some ideas from sport management perspective. There may be some opportunities in there where you know, you can get, for instance, I'm just throwing away some thinking in here. For instance, some involve the engage with the refugees, because some of the refugees may come from strong sport background, for instance. So that's you know, something that you can also always, you know, think about. Okay. All right. Now, the next thing that I'd like to discuss briefly is the corporate social responsibility, or CSR. That has become, you know, one of the main jargons. Okay, and this concept actually implies that businesses have an obligation to meet in the interest of the societies that sustain them. So again, as we discussed before, it is actually considering the interest of the society, not only the interest of the company. Okay, so the company's interest is to make profits, okay, and we also need to consider the interest of the customers, which is basically meeting their needs and wants, okay. Through meeting the customers' needs and wants, we make profits, and we also need to consider meeting the society's interest, which is basically making sure the system is sustainable, the environment is also sustainable, okay. Now, this statement actually reflects the importance of the societies, okay, because at the end of the day, societies are basically our stakeholder, okay, to ensure that the business can operate, okay. So, therefore, the business should consider all stakeholders. That includes those guys that we just discussed before, okay. All right, now there are four perspectives when it comes to theories to explain the relationship between corporate social responsibility and the business performance. Right? People debate, research scholars actually debate whether there is a correlations between implementing corporate social responsibility or being ethical and the performance of the business. Okay, because one can argue that the companies that adopt the corporate social responsibility may perform well, but actually it is hard to measure the performance based on the CSR only. Okay, there are some other issues that drive business performance, such as the competition, the industry measures, for instance, like the growth of the industry and so on and so forth. Okay, that's one of the arguments that some scholars suggest in terms of measuring business performance. Therefore, this group mentioned that the correlations between CSR and business performance is not that conclusive, because business performance is driven by a number of factors aside from the CSR. Okay, but let's have a look at these thoughts. Okay, there are four foundations theories actually that try to explain the correlations between CSR and business performance. Okay, aside from these issues, okay, we also need to look at why companies adopt the CSR. Okay, there are four theories to explain this. Okay, aside from considering the performance, but actually some other studies also suggest that yes, there are some correlations between the performance and the CSR. Okay, now let's have a look at this. We have the slack resources theory, the good management practice, or do well by doing good theory, the penance theory, and the last one is the insurance theory. Okay. Now, the slack resources theory suggests that the companies are motivated to perform CSR because they have spare financial resources. Okay. Well, I have the money, why don't I do that? Okay. I have spare cash in my wallet, let me do that. Okay. So that's the slack resources theory. Okay. The next one is the good management practice, or do well by doing good theory. Okay. This theory actually suggests that the company performs CSR because they consider that as a good management practice. Okay, so that they want to do it. So they implement it, they adopt it in their mission of the organization. Okay, so they outline the policies, procedures as a result for the company to perform socially responsible. Okay, and the next one is the penance theory, where it suggests that companies perform this to wash away the previous sins that they did. Okay, so they made mistakes, right? For instance, you can look at any organizations or companies. Okay, they did something badly, and people penalize them. Actually, and the companies or the organization actually take that action that reflects a repentance of the companies to the society. Okay, and the next one is the insurance theory. Okay, where according to this theory, the companies perform corporate social responsibility because they anticipate at some stage they may make mistakes, so they hope that the stakeholders, such as the customers, forgive them already. Okay, well, these guys are actually good, so let's just forget them. Okay, let's just forgive them because essentially these guys are good guys. That's what the insurance theory suggests. Okay, now out of these four, a research conducted in America that includes 4,500 companies across a quite a long period, actually, suggests that the second and third theories are basically the major theories that these companies adopt. Okay, good management practice, or do well by doing good theory, and the penance theory. Okay. Now, out of these four, again, although the second and third theories are the most popular ones that companies adopt, that the organizations adopt, okay, based on that study, the second theory is basically the one that the scholars suggest to be to show some correlations between performance and corporate social responsibility, okay? Because the companies basically, the companies or the organizations that adopt these basically try to promote good management practices in any aspects of the organization, including the way they perform corporate social responsibility. As a result, it drives a performance, okay? And as a result, being an ethical company, they also invite support from the stakeholders, such as the employees, the customers, and the other stakeholders, okay? Right, so that's basically the one that we just discussed before. 4,500 firms in America across 19 years, okay? It's just the second and third theory, okay? Explain the motivation of the companies performing CSR, okay? And the study also reveals that most companies investing in corporate social responsibility because of the good management practice actually boost their performance, okay? So rather than just performing that activity as a PR activity or public relations activity, okay? So it's not they adopt it because it is something that they view as important part of the good management practice of the organization. Okay? Now, these finding actually give some support to do well by doing good theory, okay, or adopting CSR as good management practice, okay. Right, so that's basically the ethics discussion, okay. So it provides us with standards to determine good and bad or right and wrong, okay. However, the ethics go beyond the legal matters, okay, and three major perspectives that managers may take include the utilitarian view, rights view, and justice view, okay. Right, I'll see you in the final topic next week, okay, bye.